Hello again, and welcome to the presentation on religion and politics and political sociology. In this segment, I'm going to talk about two forces from the world of the profane that interact with religion, globalization and secularization. Why treat these processes together? It's because they go together in the sense that they're processes that tend to happen at the same time, and they involve a similar phenomenon. Um, that phenomenon is the appropriation of European models, or models that developed in Europe, for the relationship between religions and the state in other parts of the world. One of the intended consequences of this was to balance Western power with domestically based power in societies that were a part of the globalized world system. And a probably unintended consequence was to catalyze conflicts for religious domination in societies where this had not previously been an issue. So if we think of, for example, the processes of decolonization, it's marked by events like the partition of the territory of India into the independent states of India and Pakistan in 1948. That is the delineation of geographic territory and political power according to principles of religious difference defined by a conception of the relation between a dominant religion and a dominant political elite. But let's go into a bit more detail on some elements of this process and talk first about secularization. Now, secularization is a modern process, and it becomes possible when two conditions are fulfilled. The first of those conditions is that institutions begin to develop that are not religious in origin, in character, in behavior, or in content. That is to say, where this division between the religious and the secular can develop. The second condition that is necessary for secularization to develop is that societies become diverse enough that it becomes sensible to talk about multiple religions, multiple religious traditions, multiple faiths, or about the coexistence of a part of the society that is religious and a part of the society that is not religious. To get to some dimensions of secularization when it happens, this is what it looks like. The most important elements of secularization are, first of all, the separation of religion from the state, the division of society into a relatively autonomous religious sphere and a relatively autonomous secular sphere, with the implication that since the state is dominant, the state through law and through its power over the production and dissemination of ideas regulates religion. The second element of secularization that becomes important is that religious principles are no longer central in most systems of political domination, so that groups um, who had been excluded or persecuted or reasoned out of existence by religion come to be thought of, instead of being dissenters or heretics or something like this, they come to be thought of as religious minorities. That is to say, a principle of tolerance exists both for a multiplicity of religious ideas and traditions and for the existence of a segment of society that is not religious. The corollary of this that is important is that states and religions tend to become independent of one another. But there's another form of secularization that becomes important, um, and that is that as religion comes less and less to take on a central role as the legitimating factor of the state comes to legitimate itself. That is, there is the development of what the sociologist Robert Bellah calls civil religion, in which states that become non-religious, or in some very rare cases anti-religious, tend to take on for themselves some of the character of religion. The state develops rituals, the state develops symbols, the state develops ways in which loyalty can be performed. The state develops what can be thought of as a religious ideology, a catechism of truths to which people are expected to show loyalty. Um, so some of the foundational functions of religion come to be transferred onto the state. And one of the things that this means is that as the state itself becomes a religion, secularism becomes a site of conflict. And this is something that is visible in a lot of the contemporary arguments and disputes in which religion is involved. Fundamentally, what is at stake here is um, is conflicts over identity, um, and uh, and in this sense, we are confronted with an idea about modernity. There is a question of whether the state is secular in character, whether it should be secular in character. Um, there's also, I think, a question raised about the strict association between secularization and modernity, because as societies become more modern and more secular, religion becomes more modern too. So that rather than looking at religion and secularism as being a conflict between the anti-modern and the modern, it might be important and worthwhile to talk about multiple modernities. Overall, there's a tendency, it's a very popular tendency, to think of revivals of religious tradition or political uses of religion as being anti-modern. So we tend to associate secularization with modernization and projection of religion as anti-modern. This is probably a mistake. Both religious and secular institutions develop modern characteristics as societies modernize. Think about the use of media like television to promote religion. An added dimension of this is probably provided by the various forms of globalization, which have encouraged the relationship between states and religion to take on forms in all parts of the world that originally developed as European forms in European states. Um, so in this sense, under conditions of secularization, every institution modernizes, religion too, and this is when we get into the kind of paradoxes that we're going to address in the next segment, like so-called political religion. So we'll talk about that in the next segment.